I don't know if I haven't like, I don't have a ton of experience with like external mixers, but I've yet to experience like getting a mix back the first round and being like happy with it.
Totally.
It's almost always like, oh, not what I wanted, but it's not their fault. It's just because like
Totally.
we have such a specific idea in our heads of how something should sound. Like we know the right level of like where the snare should be in relation to the vocals, and like it's all taste, you know?
Totally.
So
there's so much power you have as a mixer to change the tone and like vibe of a song that, yeah, I think in general people should expect that the first round or two, you know, for anyone that hasn't gone through that, I think you should expect that the first round or two of mix is going to be like some fairly intense notes and like acclimating to like what the song is supposed to be. Because, you know, we as producers spend so much time in the shit, you know, and so much like, and we were there a lot of times when it was created. And if not then we've at least spent a lot of time building it up and living in that. And for someone else to come in and really share the vision in a day is a lot to ask, I think.
Absolutely. It's like you're inviting somebody into your head for like a day,
Totally.
but you're like kind of expecting them to just get it because here's the reference mix and here's like maybe a reference song or something. Can you just like nail exactly what I had in mind for this?
Yeah, that's a big ask.
For
sure. For sure.
Something that can take many passes to get to a good place. But I don't know. How do you feel about mixing your own songs, like your own productions for an artist?
I always would rather someone else mix it, partly to kind of get it out of my own headspace, and partly because I don't have a lot of confidence in myself as like a world-class mixer.
Same,
I
yeah.
feel like I know there's guys that can do this better than I can do it. But at the same time, you know that you are bringing something to the sonics of it that no one else is going to bring to it because you have certain ideas. In a perfect world, you like send them. That's one thing I do, like working in Pro Tools, is I can just send the session to the mixer a lot of times.
Yeah.
And then they have the control. I don't have to worry about, oh, I printed the EQ and the reverbs on this. Because most mixers are working in Pro Tools. They can kind of just say, oh, this plate isn't working. I'm just going to put my plate on there that's way better. And then in that situation, I mean, the center of the bullseye for me is they just change exactly what needs to be changed and like level up sonically.
Exactly.
Without changing the vibe. And that's very simple to say, but not easy to do.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's the goal.
Yeah. I mean, when I first started sending things out for mixes, I kind of thought, oh yeah, like the mix is going to take the song to where it needs to be. But the reality is that we have to take the song to where it needs to be or get it 98% there. Or like ideally to the point where, yeah, this could be released as is, you know, like I'm like this, everything sounds how I want it to sound, but let's get it to this mixer who can like really do those like fine EQ carve outs for, you know, getting the vocals to really shine through like in this way that I wouldn't trust myself to.
Yeah, the fix it in the mix mentality is not a very practical one.
I've learned that to be the case anyway, because it's sort of like wishful thinking. It's like your job as a producer, I think, is to get it there so that like the mixer can't guess how it's supposed to sound, like, you know, and
Totally.
you're the one who knows how it needs to sound. So it's your job to get it to where it needs to sound or as close as possible. And then the mix is going to be more like icing on the cake, you know?
Totally.
Usually anyway, at least like that's how I feel is the best way to not just be like really disappointed when you get mixes back.
right. That's your recipe for for having a good mixing experience. I think in general, the earlier that you can fix problems and the earlier you can make things exciting, you know, like in a perfect world, you have a great source, like the guitar sound or the synth sound is just killer from the jump.
Exactly.
You record that in and it does what it needs to do without needing a lot of EQs and all that stuff. And then if it does need that stuff, you're fixing it kind of, you know, you're doing what you need to do production-wise to get it there. Because it's still ultimately either your vision or the artist's vision or some combination. And then the mixer just has to kind of make stuff sparkly. Because really the mixing process should be, I feel like it increasingly so, is just kind of a polish, like mini master kind of a thing. At least I feel like that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, like I'm thinking more and more about like an idea, like stem mixing now as being sort of what might work best for a lot of situations where, since I'm working in Ableton, I have to give stem, I have to print things out, which is lame, but there's not a lot of mixers at like a top level who will just take your Ableton session and mix in that. But it's like, do I want to just give this mixer like 3 layers of snares in different tracks and then like assume he's going to know like the right levels for each one and like give him each individual percussion piece and, the 3 guitar stacks? Like, does he really need each guitar stack separately, or can I like trust myself to get it to where I want these sounds to be and then just give him, the guitars as a group maybe. And like percussion sort of like grouped in together because it's like, just giving them what you think they're going to need and maybe trying to lock in parts that you feel strongly about.
Right.
Is sort of, I think the move now when it comes to sending stems out to the mixers.
Yeah, because you want to do what's the optimal thing that they can get and do their best with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you give them a stack of, like you said, 3 or 4 snares or whatever, what are the odds that they're going to come to the same snare conclusion that you came to, that or a similar one that fits the vibe of the song?
Yeah.
It makes a lot more sense. Like on the extreme end of that, it's like giving them a hard drive full of snare sounds that you have. You know, it's like you obviously wouldn't do that.
No. It's like you already spent time getting the snare to work in the song, so like maybe just
print that combo.
Yeah, print that combo and then trust them to like maybe make it even better.
And if they ask for the stuff, you have the splits.
Exactly. You can always break it out from there. But ideally, you can like give them a little less to work with instead of like, oh, here's 100 tracks. Like throw it in and like, good luck to you, sir.
And when it comes to vocals, obviously you want to split up. You're not going to send them like maybe definitely not with leads, but maybe with some gang stuff. It might make sense to print some of that stuff together.
Yeah. Yeah, especially with gang vocals. I feel like I usually get the gangs in like a vibe where I'm like, I'm happy with how this sounds. Like I'll just, they don't need all 10 stacks of roomy like gang vocals of us like standing in this room shouting things. It's like, no.
Totally.
Let's save space. I think more about like the poor mixing engineers like mental capacity too of like, oh, you're just gonna drop. It's like it feels mean to just drop like 90 tracks on some dude's plate and be like, here,
1,000%.
Mix this shit.
Right. You figure it out.
You figure it out.
There's some element of kind of passing the bill in that where it helps everyone if you just kind of commit to certain decisions.
Yeah. One of the other producers here, Josh Cumby, who's super talented artist, producer, writer. We had a song with this band Flaws on Red Bull Records, and we had to. We did it we did it between Studio One and Ableton, and kind of send each other stems back and forth, and then like finally did our mix of it on Studio One, and we got the mix super close. And so the way Josh sent it to the mixer, as far as I know, was he just kind of sent the groups, like here's the guitars, here's like the drums, and I was like, really? Like you're not going to give him the individual parts? He's just like,
really? Just like whole groups.
He probably separated the kick and the snare, but like a lot of the other stuff was
like guitars
kind of,
and keys as like a whole stem or something like that.
And probably not all the guitars together. It's probably like, if there's like the rhythm guitar and there's 2 guitars, maybe like those are together.
Right.
Because he was put things in different groups and like process the groups individually with like SSL stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
and that did a thing that he was connected to.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a good mixer. Like he has enough like technical know-how to get the mix really close as it is. So sort of, which I think every producer should strive to have. Because the mixing is part of the production.
So much agreed. Yeah.
So it was cool because it was like, let's give the mixer less options to fuck this up. Honestly,
totally.
Let's just kind of keep control of as much of it as we can, and if they really need like some individual cymbal sound or something, we can like break that out, but they probably won't because it sounds good as it is.
And trusting yourself to know what things you should be committed to, and also having the confidence to say this is good as this, and the mixer will have less work to do. so it kind of helps everyone.
Yeah, I agree. So,
and it's always there, like you said. If they ask for anything, you've got it handy.
Yeah.
And then communication with them and just being clear about what you get back and how you want it changed and whatever else, and being willing to iterate, 2 or 3 or 4 or who knows how many steps.
Ideally, it's a mixer in the same city as you, and you can and they'd be open to you like doing a visit and like sitting with them for half an hour or whatever, like to kind of really hone in the fine points, and then like
totally.
Yeah, which I think is nice to be able to do, because it can be hard to go back and forth on notes indefinitely. You can do that.
Oh, you could do that forever.
Dozens and dozens of times. Yeah.
It's like that old maxim that songs aren't finished. They're just abandoned at some point.
Yeah, it's 100% true.
And it definitely is true in the mix world. There's just, especially in the digital age, you could just mix something to death,
There's too many options. Mm-hmm. And one thing affects another thing, and it just becomes like an endless cycle of tweaks.
Totally, yeah, exactly. Because if you tell them to turn down the snare because it's too loud, then you get that snare down mix, and you realize that, something else should have, now the kick doesn't feel in balance with the other
exactly.
Things, the complexity of that on a just email to email basis is not always useful.
Mm-hmm.
Where like in the room, you would just be like, oh, this is clearly not the right balance now. 2 seconds later, it's fixed, and you're moving on.
Yeah. And what is or isn't a perfect balance is so subjective too. So like the mixer might have one idea of what it is, and then you might need to be there to say, actually, I'd prefer like the top end of the vocals to be just a touch, just a hair higher,
totally.
Or brighter or less bright.
Mm-hmm.
There's just infinite possibilities. So it's best to have a vision of what you want, and then to maybe show up if you care enough about it.
Right. Sometimes you have to just kind of move on with things. But.
Yes.
All right, everyone, thanks for checking out the episode. Be sure to check out the show notes for music by this week's guest and more info on the things we talked about. If you enjoyed the podcast, please tell your friends, leave us a review, or subscribe on the Bandcamp page. That's makingrecords.bandcamp.com. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time.